Hey Wargamers, Games Workshop released a preview for how Knights are going to work in 8th edition 40k. Let's take a look at that, see how it's going to impact Knights directly and how it's going to impact armies that are going against Knights in 8th edition. So before we do that, I want to say thanks for watching. If you like this video, if you like any of my other videos, go ahead, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and the notification bell as well. That way you don't miss any of my upcoming videos. Alright, so there's a link in the description below if you want to follow along, but basically we learned about 5 new things for how Knights are going to work under 8th edition. First and foremost, Knights have 24 wounds, toughness 8, 3-up save, which again, consistent with what we've talked about with vehicles on multiple occasions, they are much easier to wound, but harder to kill, at least consistently harder to kill. And consistently, maybe just by a little bit, but consistently nonetheless. They are harder to kill, which means Knights are going to be even more of a presence on the table when they are there. Something that I noticed in particular about this stat line, it has a variable movement, weapon skill, and ballistic skill, as we would expect with something like this. But on the damage table, it had 24 plus wounds. So if it had 24 or more wounds remaining, it had full capacity. And this isn't something that I had noticed before, but why is there a plus there? Does that mean that you are going to be able to recover wounds in excess of 24 via some psychic power or some special unit ability or something like that? Is that something that they know is going to be in the game, or is that something that they are just kind of covering their bases and saying, listen, we don't want to have any issues if at some point in the future we put in a mechanic that allows them to have more wounds? We don't want to have people asking, well, what happens at 25? Is there some sort of linear scaling that makes it go Super Saiyan, or is it just capped? So having 24 plus avoids that issue, but it's intriguing to me. So let me know what you think in the comments below. If you think that they're going to have some sort of special mechanic, or maybe there's a mechanic that I just have no idea exists that you're like, well, obviously that's for this reason. But yeah, so why is there 24 plus? Let me know. Then they go into some of the weapons, which are really what we care about. Start with the thermal cannon, and this provides us some insight on how Melta might work under 8th edition. Obviously, well, not obviously, but presumably Melta as a thing is gone because, of course, there's no armor value anymore. So the previous Melta mechanic would no longer work under the current or upcoming vehicle rules. But nonetheless, the thermal cannon, the important thing here is that it does d6 damage, and then within half range it can roll 2d6 and take the highest. So that's akin to the old Melta rule as far as you roll 2d6 for armor pen, but instead of just being able to punch through armor, it's doing more wounds now, which is cool. So d6 damage, 2d6 at half range, and take the highest. It means that Melta is going to be good against all multi-wound models, which again, vehicles are just another type of multi-wound model now, so that makes sense. But that means even if you have a 2-up or a 2-save or a 3-save, 2-wound or a 3-wound model, Melta is still going to be effective against it, which is intriguing. It means Melta is better. In addition to this, the thermal cannon is strength 9, has a -4 AP modifier, and is heavy D3. But it moves to heavy D6 when firing against a unit that is 5 or more strong. So there's a couple things going on there. One is that going from D3 to D6 is consistent with the thermal cannon being a blast template previously. So because they're moving away from templates or just not having templates anymore, having it be D3 or D6 makes sense. Having the D3 makes sense when it's firing against a single model, or a couple vehicles or a couple monstrous creatures, something like that. And then having D6 basically preserves that functionality when you are firing at a big unit of crisis suits or something. So yeah, I think that's basically a good way of transitioning the thermal cannon from 7th edition into 8th edition and maintaining that functionality, and actually tweaking it up a bit too, just based on what we had just talked about. So basically, this is also a really good example of how command points can be used effectively, and they talk about this in the article, that that one roll that you make for the D6, whether you get a 1 or a 6 or a 3 or a 5, that's a great option for you to use your command point in your stratagem to re-roll that die and improve the number of hits or wounds that the thermal cannon does. And that can really be a clutch move at a certain point in a game, depending on, of course, how the game is going. But overall, I think this says that Melta is going to hurt everything. Things that were Melta, that are now whatever they are going to hurt things more than they used to. Meltas are going to be important, even more so than they were before. They also say that Stomp is still around, but it's not called Stomp. It's called like Titanic Feet for Titans. I'm assuming other models, other units that are not Titans are going to have a different rule than this if they still maintain that functionality. And the wording was a little unclear that it might do 6 damage per attack, but I'm not sure. There is a weird English thing there. So yeah, but Stomp is still around is the important part. They also mentioned that the Thunderstrike Diluent can pick up and throw destroyed vehicles and killed monstrous creatures 9 inches at an opposing unit. So I just love that idea. Like you slay the Turvagon, the knight bends over, picks up the mass of bleeding flesh and just throws it on a pile of Termagants. Just brutal. And regardless of the rules, I love that because it is awesome. Rule of Cool wins here, hands down. Knights throwing monstrous creatures at at other units, that's cool. I can deal with that. It's going to suck to go against, but it's fun. So, all right. They also mentioned that there are going to be plenty of multi-damage, multi-attack creatures or units that will be able to take out knights relatively quickly. So they give the example of a Trigon again is going to be able to slice through a knight pretty reliably in a round or 2 of combat. They said if you roll really lucky, you'll get through it in 1 round, but probably looking at a couple rounds of combat. Now that's good and bad, right? It means that knights offensively are going to be good shooting. They're going to be a bit more resilient to shooting as well, but when they get into close combat, they might run into some problems. So again, a bigger emphasis on assault armies, which is good. Previously, assault armies were one of those scenarios where knights were very binary. You probably weren't going to do very well against them. And this was one of the main design features that they wanted to address, was that they didn't want knights to be a binary army. Either you squish your opponent or you get squished. They wanted to be a bit more of a back and forth and have both players have relatively equal opportunity to win the game. And so far it seems like these rules are consistent with that, and that we might actually see some pretty balanced knights under 8th edition. In addition to that, knights can walk out of combat just like everything else, but they can still shoot after walking out of combat, which is basically the same rule that we saw from the Storm Surge from the Tau preview. So Storm Surges can walk out of combat and fire that same turn, so can knights. So maybe this is something that we'll see pretty consistently with Lords of War or super heavies or gargantuan creatures as they were formerly known models. So, and it makes sense, right? Like these big guys, they shouldn't have to really worry about whether or not a guardsman is punching at their feet in terms of if they're going to be able to shoot or not. So that's cool, that's consistent, and I hope that we see that applied to multiple different types of units, and we've already seen it with the Storm Surge and the Knight, of course, like I've said. So that's a good sign. Finally, they showed us the Super-Heavy Detachment. So you used to have a special detachment that you could take for knights. Well, now any Super-Heavy or any Lord of War can participate in a Super-Heavy Detachment. That means you could have 3 to 5. It's 3 to 5 super heavies. You have to have at least 3, and you can have a maximum of 5. But any 3 super heavies that share a keyword can be part of this detachment. So that means you can have, 3 Taunar suits, or 2 Storm Surges and a Taunar, or 3 Knights of various descriptions, or 4 Knights of various descriptions. All sorts of different Lords of War as a single army, which is cool. It maintains that functionality that Knights had under 7th edition rule set, and opens it up for a lot of other people, which is cool. I don't want to see 3 Taunar on a battlefield. I don't think that's a fun game, and of course we don't know what Taunar are going to do with the new rule set since D weapons are gone. But assuming that they're similar, that type of the type of army composition is probably going to be frowned upon socially. So this is cool. I want to see it used in in certain situations, and I don't want to see it used in other situations, but it's all fun, right? So let me know what you think in the comments below, and of course, happy wargaming.